This is a short introduction to Photoshop, specifically with matte painting in mind. Okay, hi. What I wanted to do today is just do a standard introduction to Photoshop, just for the really basic user or just someone trying to get their feet wet, and just go through a lot of the simple preparations I usually do in Photoshop to customize it to how I like to work. So I just have an old painting that I did years ago in here as a placeholder. You can see the dialog window right here that actually says the name of the file, the scale that the image is looked at, and then what format that the file was saved at. And right now it's an RGB 8-bit image. And then down on the lower left, again, you can see the scale, 50%, the document size closed, and then the operating size, the working folder that Photoshop is now processing due to the layers that I have in this file. Before we get, underway with anything specific, I just figured we'll go edit preferences, and then we'll go through the general preferences. Now, if you want the hotkey for that, it's Control, or if you're using an Apple, Command K. So I'll hit General. If I hit Cancel, if I do Control K, you'll see the same thing comes up using the hotkey. And I would really suggest learning a lot of the hotkeys as you use Photoshop, especially anything that you use more than once or multiple times in a day. The faster that you get in Photoshop is the faster that you can work. So in general, I'll turn things on and off as I like to work, and some of this is subjective, in the mostly in the sense that it all depends on how long you've been using Photoshop. I found in terms of what you like and do not like for the new features that they've added. There's things that a newer user might like and I'll turn off. So it's just mostly habit. And then some things are preference for better function and better working method. So one thing, let's see here. I mean, you can reset all the preferences before you leave here too. So whatever we do, you can undo. But basically, I customize this how I like to use it. So I usually uncheck always create smart objects when placing. I just don't care for that. Under interface, let's see here, not so much workspace. A big one that I don't care for when I'm working, it's a newer thing, and I say newer, I can't even remember when they introduced this, maybe 3 to 5 years ago. Um, I like to keep this unchecked open documents as tabs. If it's checked, all your documents will come in here and be tab bars under this one working file. Now, some people might like that, but for me, sometimes I'll move images off the screen here if I hit V. So I usually work with a dual monitor, and that's something we'll talk about also in terms of organizing things for Photoshop. If you're working, let's say you're remotely and working, we're somewhere, instead of your home office or at your regular desk at work, maybe a laptop, you only have real estate that's given to your laptop, so edge to edge. So you might have to economize what you're doing. And then, when you're back in your office or home, you may be using two monitors, so you could throw a lot of your palettes off to the screen left or screen right. Now, a lot of these preferences also could deal with how do you like to work. I'm left-handed, so I'll tend to favor palettes on the right because I'll leave the left area more open where I'm going to paint, and my Wacom stylus is off to my left. So, okay, let's get back. So I'll keep open documents as tabs checked off, enable floating document window off. I don't, again, I don't like that. Tools, I'll usually keep this enable flick panning off. I just don't care for it. Um, the more fancy things, enable gestures, animated zoom, I'll turn off. Let's see what else we've got. File handling. It's got the new autosave feature and stuff, so you can keep that going so you'll always be able to recover your file. Export, not so much. Performance, now this depends on what kind of machine you're using. I'll tend to try to maximize as much so that Photoshop can use more RAM. But if you've got a large supply of RAM, then excuse me, then you don't need to allocate as much now because computers have gotten so much better that we actually have a lot more gigabytes of RAM available. Your graphics processor, you can turn this on and off to actually utilize it if you're going to use some of the 3D aspects in Photoshop. And then you can lower your history states to less than 50, more than 50. The caching, scratch disks, typically what I'm used to doing is I'll activate as many scratch disks as I have available to me, and I'll usually drag and drop these to, have the largest open space, free data, free hard drive space first, so that when Photoshop opens, it has access to a larger area and then goes smaller and smaller. And you can literally click on one and move the up arrow, click back down and move it down, and they'll move up and down. Cursors, I don't do too much. You can change to precise or standard. Same here. All depends how what you fancy. And that's kind of it. So again, I would just say go through here, turn things on and off. Typically, if it's still the same way that I remember, when you do any new clicks within the preferences, you'll want to actually close out of Photoshop and reopen. All right, so that's preferences. Okay, so the next thing would be for Photoshop is you'll see there's a lot of dialogue floating windows. And basically under the window tab, you can see what's actually turned on right now. So I have layers turned on. I have options, tools. You see the actual check mark on my image being open. Now if I click actions, you'll see that this action just popped up. But what you're noticing is everything's just kind of hodgepodged around. And if you see here, you see history, and my history's popped out in these arrows. If I click it, this is a newer feature in Photoshop where you can basically dock layers or windows. And then over here, this is linked to the left, but I can actually move this around based on my preference. So, and if you see that I drag it back, see I get that line, this is actually locking it to the side. If I hit full and unfull, you're basically maximizing Photoshop to the edges of your file, of your monitor space. And then right here you can see that this is just a floating window, and behind my layers you can basically see I have a square that I can make this full screen or maximize. But what you can see is it actually goes over my Photoshop settings, which I do not like. So typically what I will do is there's another way to change how this file formats. Down here on the left, if you hover over this, left click, there's the standard screen mode, full screen with menu bar, full screen mode only. And you can see right here there's an F for all of them. And that basically is a hotkey to cycle through. But if you can see they're selectable, I can go to that full screen mode. And if I hit F again, it's full screen mode but no layers. And now if I go one more time, I'm back to where we started. And if again you see, I've got the three options. So that's the three different ways that we can see, view our elements in Photoshop. Now there's another way to make things easier in terms of the cleanup is if you hit the tab key, you're going to temporarily hide all your layers, all your basically floating palettes, even the toolbar on the top. And that's just nice. Sometimes you want to go to like presentation mode and look at how it's looking. and not see everything. So if you hit the F once, you still have floating elements, but then you hit F again, and then now it's cleaned up. Or you hit Tab, and it's basically kind of doing the same, except if you hit F for that third time, you see the background color looks different. It's not the gray background that we're used to seeing here. Now, if you right-click over in that field, you can actually change that color. Now, if I cycle back through, here's that color, which is dark gray. Hit F, you've changed a different color here. You can actually customize that color. Hit F one more time and it's blacked out. Again, you can right-click and change it. So each of these modes, you can have a different way to view everything. And now we've cycled back through with the F key, and now you can still not see any floating palettes. So if you hit Tab, those will come back. So now let's just try to organize and figure out what would be a good layout of all these tabs. So if you see, I'm just going to X out all of these. And if I go back to Window, right now the only three things that are clicked are Options, Tools, and the Matte Painting PSD that I have open. So if I uncheck Tools, the toolbar goes away. If I go back to Tools, there it is again. Options, see the options go away. And then now it's just kind of customizing what it is that you'll use a lot in Photoshop. So if I click the window, for me, for doing matte painting, these are the tools that I use a lot. So I will use actions. I do use brushes. I will use adjustments. Brush presets, and now see the brush presets is within the brush area. You can do color. Say channels, so there's channels, and channels came with layers. History. History is right here. Layers itself, that's just selected because of the channel, so that's not really new. You can have the navigator, which is useful. You can stretch that out and make the image larger, so you can have this docked into a corner. So that way, basically, let's move some of these. So the other nice thing with this new layout with Photoshop is if you click once, there's like a minimized view. So they go into like more of a thumbnail size, so that it's easier to do with your real estate. And I accidentally hit something. Okay, so now it's just a little bit easier. So now you can see I have my image full screen. If I hit the Z key for the hotkey to zoom in, I can zoom in and look into one specific area of my image, and then in the navigator I'm zoomed in, and then now I can actually use the navigator to also zoom into my image. Now another random kind of thing that I like to do sometimes is another tool that you can do that in is if you do arrange, so window arrange. If you go down here, new window for MPaint Theater, if you click that, what it's basically done, you're not opening a brand new window, duplicate document of this Photoshop file. This is actually another window to view what you're doing. So I've used this a bunch as a nice tool where I can be super zoomed in over here, have my image splayed out where I can see it full size, and then if we find, these aren't organized yet, but just so you get a sense, I could paint over here and it updates over here, and then you even see it update over in here. And then you could always have this window, you could drag it so it's just one side area. that you can do super detail work over here and then see how it looks with your main image throughout everything. And you're not taking any major hit with your file because this is just a duplicate viewing window. So again, it's window, workspace, window arrange, and on the bottom, a new window. And then basically you can close this out. It's not going to ask you to save yet because your real file is over here. So even if you just want to use that a little bit, if you're going to be doing a lot of detail work, it just comes in handy because you're not constantly, zooming in and zooming back out, that you can keep doing the work that you need to do, but you automatically get an update. So it's a very live feed of what you're doing. Okay, so let me arrange the palettes how I would normally do it, and I can step you through that a little bit. So just hang on 1 second. So here's a good general organization. So you can see here I just kind of expanded out my window so that I can do work within this area. Zoom in. Still have access to my control panel on the left. Well, my tool panel. And if you see over here, I've basically have the navigator. I can go to a color picker. I can basically go to my layers. I could switch to the channels. And then you can see here I have an embedded strip of other commands. So this is my brushes. And if you see this line right here, you can see that there's tabs within what I selected. So it's also the brush preset. If I click back, it closes. So I can do whatever operation I need to do with that. My history, actions, properties for, let's say if I was going to add an adjustment layer, that's where those would be. Paths, so paths can be created or whatnot. So it's very customizable. So you could really have very little real estate be affected if you wanted more the thumbnail version. But I do like having the layers wording available to me at all times. I can scroll through all the layers that I have here very, very easily. And this feels like a very good workflow. And you can see here, this workflow works very well for a single monitor. And when I don't want to see anything, I can go full screen. So now that the document goes large, and what's nice about that, I hit the F key again, just in case see there's canvas area that you can't see that I can zoom in. If I hit F one more time, all the palettes go away again. But what you're seeing here is, see, I hit the space bar, I get the hand tool and I want to move. The nice thing about working with hitting the F key once is you have this nice free floating area, and what I like about that is I'm able to get in and do work right on the edge and move it center if I want, versus if you hit F twice, you're really limited into that corner. So you'd have to zoom in there. So I just kind of like that it ends up giving me that space to do a little bit more, freestyle, and then you can just go back to where you are. So this was just a nice intro to Photoshop, nothing too much, just to get you going. I'll probably do a second version of this where we can go a little bit further in some of these techniques and thoughts.